Hi everyone and welcome back. This is Dividend Investing Part 2. This is obviously a continuation from my previous video, Dividend Investing Part 1, the basics. Please make sure to go back and watch that video to learn the basics before jumping onto this one. I'll be going over what is a DRIP, how to enroll, how to unenroll, de-enroll, what are the positives, what are the negatives, and lastly, I'll be going over a worksheet example to illustrate the cumulative or the snowball effects of DRIP and the power of growth dividends. Please remember to thumbs up the video and subscribe to the channel. Remember to turn on the notification bell so you get a little ring every time I release a new video. I definitely broke the dividend counter in the last video, so I'll try to say payments or distributions now so it doesn't sound as repetitive. First point, what is a DRIP? It stands for Dividend Reinvestment Plan. Most companies, but not all, that pay dividends offer a dividend reinvestment plan. It allows shareholders or unit holders the option to receive their dividend in shares instead of cash. Second point, how to enroll in a DRIP. It's pretty straightforward. Either inquire directly with the company, just Google TD Bank DRIP. You can go to the site, download the form and follow the instructions and send it in. Or through your brokerage if you have a discount brokerage like Questrade or Wealthsimple. Questrade offers a DRIP for any share or ETF. Just go to the website or you can Google Questrade DRIP and fill out the form. If you have 100 shares of a company, let's say Procter & Gamble, you don't have to DRIP the entire amount. The entire 100 shares doesn't have to go into that dividend reinvestment plan. What's good about this is that you have the option to choose how many shares to put in the plan, which ones to receive the dividends in shares and which ones to receive in cash. Also, if you sell a stock on a Monday that was in a DRIP and then the next day on Tuesday you change your mind, you rebuy the same shares again, it doesn't automatically go into your dividend reinvestment plan. You have to re-enroll by filling out the same paperwork all over again. One item to keep in mind, if you're enrolled in a DRIP with a brokerage and not the company itself, let's say you have Procter & Gamble shares, but you choose to enroll in, let's say, Questrade, it's called a synthetic DRIP. It's not as good in terms of compounding as a real DRIP as if you enrolled with Procter & Gamble themselves, but I'll talk more about that later on. Number 3, how to unenroll. If you're with a brokerage doing a synthetic DRIP, it's pretty easy. All you have to do is sell the shares and you're automatically out of the plan. You won't be getting any dividends anymore, so obviously you can't be reinvesting them. If you're enrolled in a dividend reinvestment plan directly with the company, let's use Procter & Gamble, you either have to call them on the phone or submit a form online instructing them to sell the shares. Number 4, what are the benefits? Coincidentally, I can think of 4 benefits. The first being it's passive, meaning it's automatic. There's no thinking or doing anything involved. Once the dividend is paid by the company, it's automatically reinvested with no work on your part. Second benefit, discounts. Companies usually offer a discount on the share price of the stock you're reinvesting in. I'll probably throw up 1 or 2 examples here. It looks like they're offering a small percentage discount for every DRIP user. Third benefit, no commission or transaction fees. Usually when you go to purchase shares of a company, you have to pay the $5 or $10, depending on which brokerage you choose, that it takes to purchase the shares. It's the transaction fee. When you're enrolled in a dividend reinvestment plan, it's either commission free or the company pays the commission on your behalf. So you pay nothing. So if you get monthly or quarterly dividends, you don't have to pay the commission it takes to get those dividends reinvested. But keep in mind, with all these new discount brokerages popping up, like Wealthsimple, who offers free trades, like commission-free trades, this benefit is slowly being eroded, and I believe in the future it'll be a non-issue. The last benefit is fractional or partial shares. If you're enrolled in a TD Bank dividend reinvestment plan, it is the only time you'll be able to get fractional shares or partial shares. Outside of a DRIP, you'll have to purchase whole shares. Your dividend will rarely be the exact amount to buy whole shares every single time. So the benefit of this is that you get 0.5 of a share, 0.4 of a share, and you'll be earning dividends on those 0.5 or 0.4 fractional shares, which obviously add up over time. Back to one of my previous points early in the video about a synthetic DRIP, like with Questrade, if you note the fine print or the conditions, it only purchases whole shares. This is not a real DRIP where you get fractional shares. Any amount in excess of a share, you'll get in cash. So if you get a dividend and it's not even enough to reinvest into one share, you'll get the entire amount deposited into your account as cash. You'll get no new shares. Just briefly going over the benefit of why a company would want to set up a dividend reinvestment plan. A DRIP reduces the amount of cash they have to pay out every month or every quarter to their shareholders as dividends. So instead of paying it out, they could use that cash to reinvest in the business or do whatever else they want with it. The downside, one of the negatives, is share dilution, which isn't a big deal in my mind. Next, what are the negatives? There aren't too many negatives in my mind. I can think of a few items. One is lack of diversification. If you only own one stock and you DRIP, you take those dividends, reinvest them, you're 100% invested in that one company, you're 100% invested in that one industry. Or let's say if you buy 4 stocks and they're 4 bank stocks, you get all those dividends and they're all in a dividend reinvestment plan, you're too deep into that one industry. One thing people would like to do is to, let's say you have 4 bank stocks, you get those dividends, pile it up, and you can buy something new entirely all together. Yeah, so some people like to get their dividends in cash to buy separate companies or industries altogether. Again, these aren't really big negatives or downsides, but they're just things to keep in mind. Another item is tax. You can't escape tax. Even though you're not getting any physical money from the reinvestment plan, you still received the income. You still received a benefit. So you're still subject to tax unless you're enrolled in an RRSP or a TFSA. Shout out to my RSP TFSA videos. This can get rough if you're not invested in a tax-deferred or tax-free savings account. Imagine if you build up a good dividend portfolio, a good dividend reinvestment plan, and you have, let's say, $20,000 in dividends reinvested every year. Then come tax season and you have an additional $20,000 in dividends reinvested that you haven't received in cash and you haven't paid any tax on. Depending on your tax bracket, this might be $5,000 tax payable. It might be $10,000 tax payable. All it takes is a little tax planning and a little knowledge and research, and you should be fine come tax season. Now I want to turn to my Excel because I'm a numbers guy to show you guys the compounding effect, first of just DRIP, and then DRIP taking into account dividend growth. So let's take a look. An example here is if you own 1,000 shares of a company at $5 a share with an 8% yield. Let's say they pay quarterly. So here you have year 1, you have 4 payments of 10 cents each, or total is 40 cents. Your first dividend will be $100. Great, grand, that's fantastic. You can get that in cash, or if you reinvest it, you have an additional 20 shares. This is calculated by taking your dividend divided by 5, which is $5 a share, to get your extra 20 shares. So at the end of the period, end of the quarter, you have 1,020 shares. Moving on, let's say we go to year 2. Look at the compounding effect of the dividends. So you know what? Let's look at the second quarter just in itself. We went from $100 in dividends to $102 just from one quarter. This is only 2%. It's not a big deal, but you can already notice we're getting fractional shares now. We're getting 20.4 shares for a total of 1,040 shares, 0.4. And again, like I mentioned earlier, we're getting distributions, we're getting dividends on this 0.4. Let's take a look at the end of year 2. This is a 14%, let's say almost 15% increase in our dividends. Again, compounding effect. What if we keep going? What if we go to year 5? Let's look at this. Reinvesting our dividends for 5 years quarterly, assuming everything else stays still. We're assuming a stable 5% per share price just for ease of example. This might not be a real life example, I get it. But take a look at the end of year 5, after 20 pay periods, because it's quarterly, our dividend is 45% higher than it was at the beginning, just because of the dividend reinvestment plan. Let's take this further. Everyone here should be a long-term investor. What if we invest for 10 years? Let's take a look at the 10-year example. At the end of 40 pay periods, we're at $216. That's over double of what we paid. That is our distribution. Now take a look at our value with DRIP. The value of our total portfolio, it's pretty easy. If we go $5 times the number of shares we have, which is 2,208 shares, we're at $11,000. Then take a look at the portfolio value after 10 years without DRIP. Assuming everything else stays the same, we'll only be at $9,000. This is taking into account $400 a year, which is our distribution, times 10 years, and then 1,000 shares times our initial $5 per share price to give us $9,000. So look at this difference. Assuming all else, we're not putting any other funds in, we're not reinvesting more money. This is just letting the plan roll itself. Let's take this further. Let's go all the way to 20 years because we're long-term investors. Our dividend is now $477 a share, almost 5 times our initial dividend. Granted, it is 20 years, I get it, but look at the compounding effect. Our portfolio value is $24,377 with a DRIP. It's almost double our portfolio value without a DRIP. If we just took that money and spent it or did something else, who knows? But we'd only be worth $13,000, which again is taking $400 a year dividend times 20 years and then our initial $5,000 investment. Now, this is just taking into account stable dividends, stable stock price. What my favorite thing about dividends is finding the dividend growth companies that have been increasing every year. Let's take a look at an example. I have it over here conveniently of dividend growth. Keep in mind, I'm taking into account 3% consistent growth a year. It might always be like this, but again, bear with me, it's just ease of example. Just ease of understanding. If you see over here, the dividend stays steady at 10 cents a share because they only increase annually. So over here, we're at 10.3 cents. So initially we were at 40 cents a share, and then we went to 41.2 cents a share. And then it increases from then on. Also note, I rounded here just to give me nice clean round numbers. But let's take a look. At the end of the year 1, we're at $106, which is consistent. Let me make this smaller actually. End of year 1, dividends didn't increase. We're at 106 here, 106 here. But let's take a look at the end of year 2. We're at $118 versus $114. This is just from 1 year of increase. Let's take this further. Let's look at 5 years. $166 versus $145. This is with reinvested dividends increasing growth 3% a year. We're long-term investors here. Let's go to 10 years. Our dividend will be $312 versus $216. This is almost a 50% increase from our already good DRIP example. And our portfolio value would be $12,000 compared to $11,000. Not a big difference, but a difference nonetheless. Let's take this to the extreme example, 20 years. We're all good investors, we hold for the long term. 20 years. Here we go. Our dividend at the end of 20 years is $1,397. It doesn't make sense, does it? Look at this. Our dividend for that year, $5,311. Our dividend after 20 years is more than our initial investment, and this is not putting any other investment in, not a single penny in. Our annual dividend would be more than what we've invested in. Look over here. We're at $477, assuming no growth. We're almost at $1,400 with growth. This is just 3% growth. I've seen companies that have done 10%, not over 20 years, but higher nonetheless. Let's take a look at our portfolio value. This is one investment dripping over 20 years with growth, $41,318. Compared to DRIP with no growth, $24,000, and then no DRIP at all, $13,000. Again, I'm going to say it one last time, the compounding effect. A few examples of Canadian companies from my portfolio that have continually increased their dividends are RBC, TD Bank, Enbridge, and Smart REIT. These are the ones that I've invested in that I've experienced growth with every year since I've invested in them. Some examples of US stocks that have been continually increasing, some for over 50 years: Coca-Cola, 3M, Target, McDonald's, and Walmart. Do you see why I had to cut this video into 2 parts? There's just so much to cover. So that's all for today. Please don't forget to check out my previous videos introducing the stock market if you go back far enough, and an intro to dividends, which is my last video. Please tune into my next few videos where I was requested to reveal my whole portfolio, as well as my monthly income from my dividend paying portion of my portfolio. Thanks, guys.